Hello and welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. My name's Harriet. Today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for the month of May, so I'm going to be talking through all of the books that I finished this month. I actually ended up reading 13 books, which is a lot more than what I was expecting. I really didn't think that I had read a lot just because I had been working quite a lot the last couple of weeks, so I've not had much time to read recently, but obviously beforehand I was at home for quite a bit after I came back off my holiday, so I clearly had a lot of time to read lots of books, so I feel like that is how I managed to read 13, but let's just talk about the ones that I read. So the first one I'm going to briefly mention is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Now I'm actually going to be uploading a video that is specifically for this book and my review for this book, so I'm not really going to talk through it, but this is the first book in the Farsi trilogy by Robin Hobb and the first book that I've tried by this author. It is part of a fantasy series following a young orphan named Fitz and what happens when he is kind of utilised by the royal family and turned into assassin, and he also has magical abilities as well, and it's just following his journey, kind of a stepping stone into the trilogy and into the world that Robin Hobb has created, because I think there are quite a few books that are kind of interlinked with each other, which I'm hoping to get to in the future. So from that you can probably guess that I really did enjoy this book. I found it very entertaining. I thought that it was a slow burner, but towards the end there I really started to get invested in the characters and the story, so it actually ended up being a 5-star rating for me, so I'm really excited to continue with this series and see what else Hobb has created. Another book that I have mentioned, and I mentioned it in my wrap up for last month because I was still reading it at the time, but I did finish it, and that is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This is a YA kind of dark romance, almost The Little Mermaid retelling in a way, following a siren who makes it her duty to consume the hearts of sailors, mainly princes and kings, and what happens when things go a little bit astray. I am not going to be doing a full review for this just because I feel like there's not much I can say without ruining it, but I found it super entertaining. I was really in the mood for reading kind of Disney inspired and fairy tale inspired novels, so this was the perfect time for me to pick this up. I don't usually get on with YA, but I didn't find that this was too tropey. I actually really did enjoy the romance that was in here, and I enjoyed the characters and how flawed they were. So overall a really enjoyable read. I actually gave it a 4-star rating, which is very high for YA. Usually I don't get on with them, but this one really did surprise me and I'm super glad that I read it. So yeah, if you're looking for a dark kind of fairy tale inspired story, definitely pick this one up and give it a go. It's not too long and very easy to read. And then I continued on with the A Pinch of Magic series by Michelle Harrison. I haven't read all 4 books, but I did finish the 3rd book in the series, which is A Tangle of Spells. And if you didn't know what this series is about, then you probably have not watched any videos of my channel because I talk about them quite a lot. It's basically a kind of children's series following these 3 sisters and the magical antics that they get up to. What I really like about this series is there are so many underlying messages about friendship and trust and family and lots of life lessons that can be taught and learned through these stories, and I just think they're really beautiful. I think they're really funny and I enjoy the characters. This book is the 3rd of 4 books. I don't know if there are going to be more books or not, but the 4th one has recently been released and I will be hopefully getting to that in the next month. But yeah, this one is following the 3 sisters as they move out into a different town, and there is probably the most magic that we have seen so far in this series. Everything is very magical, very whimsical and a lot of fun, so I ended up giving it a 5-star rating. I really enjoyed it. This is something that I wish I could have read when I was a kid, but obviously they weren't released when I was a child. But I feel like if you have children at home that are just getting into reading, if they like Harry Potter, Studio Ghibli, then they're probably going to really love this. Or if you're an adult and you love those things, then please pick these up and give them a go because they are brilliant. Another children's book that I read this month was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I think that's how you say his name. This is a classic story. I didn't actually realise how many books are in this Wizard of Oz series, but I read the first one, which is what inspired the film that I'm sure we have all seen. It is a beautiful film. If you didn't know the story, we're following a young girl called Dorothy, and she ends up being transported to this world called the Land of Oz, and it's all about the people that she meets there, the creatures that she meets, and again the magical adventures that she goes on. So I was really craving those kind of magical fairy tale stories at the start of this month, and I really enjoyed this. I'm going to be continuing with the series. I have them all on my Kindle in a big collection, so really excited to continue with these. I think that the writing style was very fun and really easy to read without having any information missing or feeling like it was rushed. So yeah, just a great book overall, and again I did give this a 5-star rating. Now by this point you might be thinking, wow, this girl gives out a lot of really high ratings, but the next book that I'm going to talk about did kind of disappoint me a little bit and let that down. So it is a poetry collection called The Heeding, and I thought this was going to be kind of ancestral, talking about kind of the history of England, just based off the front cover, which I probably shouldn't have done because it does very clearly say on the inside that this is based around kind of modern times. And I've not read a lot of modern poetry. I do stick to things that are more about kind of the nature side of things as opposed to day-to-day life. And this one does deal a lot with COVID and lockdown, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, then you probably would like this. It's very easygoing and fun poetry. It's not too flowery. However, I prefer the flowery side of poetry, so I think that is why I didn't personally enjoy this one. I also was thrown off a little bit by the use of terms that would only really make sense to people that have lived within kind of the 21st century, and that would be the fact that one of the poems literally had the word eBay in it, and I don't know, it's just not for me. But some people might not be bothered by it. I just wasn't expecting it. So this ended up being a 2.5 star read for me. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but I am just not going to read it ever again. And I did like some of the elements in here. There were parts where he was talking about birds, but the rest of it was about kind of lockdown and eBay and the internet and things like that, and it's just not what I was expecting it to be. The next book I didn't really give a rating to because it's actually a super short story by H.P. Lovecraft, and I read this out loud to my partner in the garden just as kind of like a practice because we never read aloud anymore, and I feel like when I'm reading out loud, I'm focusing more on pronouncing the words right as opposed to actually taking in the story. So I wanted to practice a little bit, and I thought short stories would be the way to go. And why not start with an author whose writing has always completely baffled me and I usually find very confusing. So the short story that I read was Polaris. I literally can't tell you anything about this because it is so short, I would ruin the whole thing for you, but it's set in the dreamscape side of Lovecraftian tales. I think it's classed as the dream cycle, not dreamscape, sorry about that. Yeah, the dream cycle. And I just didn't know how to rate this because it is so short, but I did really enjoy the writing style, and I feel like I'm going to want to read more by Lovecraft, which is really good. So it's definitely inspired me to pick up more by this author. I just don't know when I'm going to get the time to, or when I'm going to have the patience to, because his writing was definitely very prosy and very in-depth, and I have to be in the mood to read stuff like that. But I did enjoy it, and it was fun to read aloud. So if you're struggling to get into this author's writing, I definitely recommend reading it aloud and just kind of sinking yourself into these magical worlds that this author created. The next book I read was a lot more easygoing, and that was Spring by Ali Smith. I'm currently working through the seasonal quartet, so summer is the last book that I need to read, and obviously I will be reading that in the summer months. This book is following a man who is actually on the brink of suicide. He is not having a very good time, and he's really struggling in life, and then we get to meet another character as well who's just kind of getting on with life. They are not feeling the elements of depression, and they're actually working with people who need extra care. So these characters come together, and then they're brought together by another character who I'm not going to say too much about, but I do think they were heavily inspired by someone who was in the news quite a lot a couple of years ago. If you read this, then please let me know if you found any inspiration by any people that we may know to do with kind of environmental issues and things like that. I don't know if it's just me picking up on it. These books are beautiful in their own way because I think that Ali Smith is really good at writing believable characters and also creating very atmospheric works and dealing with topics that a lot of authors just kind of skirt over, and I think that's really great. But I do think that sometimes they're a little bit too simple. There's not too much character development in there. They're very slow, they're very quiet books. But when I read this at the time, I really enjoyed it. It was the kind of book that I was looking for after reading all of these kind of fantasy magical stories. So I did end up giving this a 4-star rating. I don't actually know if I'm going to keep the quartet though once I finish it. I don't feel like these are going to be books that I want to revisit. As much as I enjoy them and I like the author's writing, I just can't see myself getting much more from it than what I've already got, if that makes sense. If you've read any books by Ali Smith, please let me know if you feel the same or if you feel differently. Maybe I do need to reread them to get more from them. Let me know down below. The next book that I picked up was The Borrowers by Mary Norton. Again, I can't say too much about this because I am actually going to be doing a complete video on it and a review, and also I'm going to be comparing it to the Studio Ghibli film that came out called Arrietty. That's going to be part of my Ghibli collection. I will leave that playlist link down below so you can check it out if you are interested. I've only actually got 2 other videos in that playlist so far, but hopefully I can work on that. Anyway, if you didn't know what The Borrowers is about, it is a children's story following these tiny people that live within the walls of this home, and they borrow things to obviously create their houses, create meals and things like that. And it's usually things that we as human beings would not really notice as missing. So things like a hair grip, a thimble, a little bit of thread, all those things that in real life you feel like you lose and have to replace all of the time. It's almost as if the borrowers have come in and taken those. So that's kind of what this story is about, and we're following the youngest of this family called Ariete and what happens when she starts borrowing when she comes of age. Some crazy stuff goes on. I do definitely recommend this book. It would be lovely to read to your children. It would be nice if you just want a very easy and whimsical read. But like I say, I'll be doing a full review on it, so you'll have to check that out when it is up. But as a little spoiler, I absolutely loved it and gave it 5 stars. There are quite a lot of 5 stars this month. I did have a very good and successful reading month. That goes for the next 2 books. So the first I'll talk about is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. I've not tried anything by this author before, but Callum picked this book up for me, and it is very kind of Jane Austen-esque. It is set a couple of centuries ago and following these people in this society that Anthony Trollope created, and it's just very transportive. It really does get you back into that time, and we are following someone called the Warden who has been accused of taking money from a charitable church and kind of exploiting the charity and the people that are giving money to it. And it's just a very interesting story. It didn't go the way that I was expecting it to go, but it really did make me think, and it makes you think about human nature and jumping to conclusions and things like that. Overall, I just thought it was a very entertaining book, and I'm really excited to try more books within this kind of series. I do think there are quite a few, so I don't know when I'll be able to do that, but I'm looking forward to it nonetheless. Really easy to read considering the time that it was written. I think it was written in the 1800s. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. But yeah, super easy to get into, and if you are a fan of Jane Austen or classic works, things from Charles Dickens, I think that you should definitely give this author a go and see what you think. And then the other 5-star read is The Terror by Dan Simmons. I've got a review for this, so I'll leave it linked down below, and I'm not going to say anything more about it because I do go quite in depth with it in that. But yeah, check that out if you are interested in any kind of historical fiction and horror. The next book was part of a buddy read with Rachel's Reading Nook, who again, I'll leave their channel linked down below, and I'm so glad that I buddy read this because I don't know if I would have finished it elsewise, and that is The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigerda. So this is a YA novel following a young girl who at the very start of the book comes out to her parents as lesbian, and it's the implications of her doing that within a Muslim household, and kind of the reaction from her parents, the reaction of her peers at school when they find out. And then she also has to deal with the fact that she has a really big crush on someone that she's competing with in this kind of business venture that the school is doing. So our main character has a lot going on, she's got a lot to deal with, and I just felt like the author didn't really dive deep enough into a lot of the issues within this book. So there is so much that our main character has to deal with, and it felt like those things weren't touched on enough for me. I don't know how to describe it. It almost felt as though our main character was quite problematic and she was never held accountable for that, but when other people did things, that was like the end of the world, the end of the line. Our main character didn't want us to know anything about them. I don't know, it was all just very one-sided, and then throughout the novel there were a couple of times where it felt like the author's own thoughts were seeping into the book, and it just didn't match with the vibe of the rest of the book and the way that our main character would speak. There were just a couple of lines that really threw me off. There was also a line saying that our main character didn't like Taylor Swift's white feminism, which I don't really understand what that meant or what Taylor Swift has done wrong for the feminist movement. Please let me know if you know down below, but it just felt weird. There were some lines that just felt very out of place, and a lot of the characters didn't feel realistic for me. There were parts of the book that were very sweet, especially towards the end. There were a couple of really nice conversations, people were more open about talking about what was going on, but overall I just kind of didn't enjoy this book. I found it a little bit boring, there weren't enough cute moments, and I just didn't really get anything from it. So it ended up being a 2.5-star rating, and I think that was mainly due to the fact that I read it with Rachel and it just made it slightly more enjoyable for me. Yeah, I definitely won't be reading this again. The next book was very kindly sent to me for a fair and honest review, but that doesn't include my YouTube channel, so this is just me talking about it. And that is The Crowns of Crossworld by D.E. Knight. This again is a children's YA series. I've only read this first book, but we are following an orphan child named Ivy, and what happens when she finds out that she is actually enlisted into this magical school and she can learn how to harness magic. The magic system is very interesting. It's not something that I'd ever really seen before. However, the characters are written so much younger than what they actually are. Ivy is supposed to be 16 and she honestly talks like she's about 8 to 10 years old. The magic system was a little bit confusing considering this is aimed at a younger audience. I'm not sure if enough things were described well enough for everyone to really pick up on how things work. I'm not even 100% certain on how things within this story work. It just felt a little bit rushed to me and it didn't really grip me the way that I was hoping it to. However, it might just be me because of those younger characters. Perhaps if you are a teenager reading this, you might possibly enjoy it. I think it has a lot of potential with the magic system, and perhaps as the series goes on you get that character development that I was hoping to get. So overall I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, it was kind of just medium for me, so it ended up being a 3-star rating. And then the final book that I read within the month of May is The Leviathan by Rosie Andrews. I am so happy to say that I enjoyed this book because I bought a very beautiful special edition of it. I'll show you now. It is this one here and it's got sprayed edges. It's also signed by the author, so if I didn't like this, that probably would have been a huge waste of money, but thankfully I did really enjoy this. Actually reminded me a little bit of Dracula in some parts. So this is set in the 1600s during the English Civil War. Oh sorry, there's some fluff on the top. That's what I get for having cats. Yeah, set within the Civil War, and we're following this young man that comes back from fighting, and he finds out that his father is basically bedridden, and the person that was supposed to be looking after him, their kind of chambermaid I suppose, has been accused of dabbling in witchcraft and dark magic. So that is all I will say about this because I believe that's all it says on the synopsis, so I don't want to say anything more. But this was super interesting. It deals a lot with kind of mythology and definitely a lot with religion as well, which I wasn't expecting, but I actually found extremely interesting. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about religion. This is a fantasy book, so I do realise that it's not going to be completely accurate, but it was cool to read. I really liked the characters. I felt like they were really well developed and they had realistic conversations, relationships. It just felt very gripping. In terms of how I think that it compares a little bit to Dracula or was inspired by Dracula, you can't compare it to that book because that book is brilliant. Not that this isn't brilliant, but that is just one of those classics that really stands out. I don't want to compare the two. But yeah, within Dracula, you obviously have this young woman who is acting slightly differently to what she usually would, and the young men are trying to figure out what is happening with her. It's kind of like that in this book with two of the main characters, which I found very interesting, and it just seemed to have that kind of influence in there. There is a witch hunter as well. But I'm definitely not complaining because I did enjoy Dracula, so I'm glad that I got those kind of creepy vibes within this book as well, and just the storyline was great. I really enjoyed it. The ending was a little bit of a letdown for me. I did want something a little bit more impactful, but overall I gave this a 4-star rating. I thought it was really good. So yeah, those are the 13 books that I read within the month of May. Please let me know if you've read these, what you rated them, what you thought of them, and also let me know your favourite read from the month. But that is everything from me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!